I'm genuinely really excited by people that are beyond the limits of what society sees as acceptable.
I've heard you various times compared to Louis Theroux. You are going into murderers and prisoners and terrorists.
I've interviewed convicted terrorists, drug dealers in Thailand, target killers who murdered people in Mexico, people who will start sentences with things like, I'm not racist, but...
Over the course of the journey you're taking the viewer on, they turn into these complex, wounded, troublingly understandable people. Hello and welcome to The Sacred. This is a podcast about the deep values of the people shaping our public conversations, and my name is Elizabeth Oldfield. Today, I'm really delighted to be talking to Mobeen Azhar, who is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, producer, presenter, radio host, journalist, who has made many, many films for the BBC, Channel 4, and other places. Most recently, Small Town, Big Riot, and The Soldiers That Saved Britain. Mobeen, thank you so much for being with me.
I'm really pleased to be with you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to ask you a big, juicy question. There's no warm-up. What is sacred to you?
Oh my God, that is the question, isn't it? So there are two things that are sacred to me right now. They're both interlinked. So I'll start with the lighter one, if that's okay. So right now, I would say I have reconnected to the dance floor. I am raving like no one's business. I don't know what is wrong with me.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there is. But yeah, I have definitely reconnected to the dance floor as of late. So I'm talking about techno in particular, and I'm talking about raves. Not kind of, yes, let's go out and be social and have a chat and maybe a little dance. I'm talking about full on 8 to 10 hours, daytimers that turn into nighttimers. I'm talking about the rave scene. So right now, the rave scene is absolutely sacred to me.
Wow. That's such a source of transcendence, right?
It really is. It is taking me to places that I didn't know about. And I've always been, I'd say I've always been a kind of hyper-social person. So I like being around people. I've always liked dancing. But never in the techno scene and the house music scene. It was always a bit different to that. And so as of late, the dance floor and the rave, let's put it that way, the rave is sacred to me.
I want to hear your deeper one too, but I also want to ask, have you ever done explicitly ecstatic dance?
Have I ever done an explicitly ecstatic dance?
It probably doesn't make any sense. I only discovered this quite recently through my more... some of them are reclaiming the word woo, through my more woo friends. And there is, one of them's called Five Rhythms, but I had a guest on called Clementine Morrigan, who does a lot of ecstatic dance. And it is specific, it is a sort of container where you go and you are all just there to dance in yourself into transcendence ecstatically as a sort of spiritual practice that can be for anyone. And then you go away again. And I found it very nourishing indeed.
So I have never done that, but I might have to leave this recording early because that sounds like just my kind. I should be on the way there right now. I was going to say I do an ecstatic dance kind of every Friday, every Saturday, but I think what you're talking about is a bit more specific.
Different
I'll
ecstatic.
Definitely look that up. Yeah.
And tell me your deeper thing.
So it's important to say this is linked to the rave, and I didn't really think about this until a few months ago. So I think at the moment we're living in a time where the world can feel quite oppressive. Certainly it does to me.
Yeah. And
I'm a second generation. I'm the kid of immigrants, so economic immigrants who came to the UK from the Punjab in the 60s. And so I think one of the things I really respected and maybe took for granted is the idea of civility and the idea of the rule of law, right? I come from a country, where there are hierarchies and there's a power struggle, and if you're rich, you can circumvent laws. That's what Pakistan is really about. So I think I was raised in a way where I thought, okay, ultimately, Britain and Europe have this idea of the rule of law. And I think as of late, I'm just going to say it, this isn't an opinion. We're in a time where really respected organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Beit Salem, really, really respected human rights organizations have spoken about the fact that there's a genocide going on. And I think the past couple of years have really thrown into disarray this idea that we live in a world where never again really means never again, where we live in a world where the rule of law will be applied universally. And we live in a world where ultimately, you know, things might be bad and things might be difficult, but when it counts, people will step up. Our institutions will step up. Our governments will step up. Yeah. And I feel the idea of civility, the preservation of human life, all of those things I hold sacred. And I feel in the past 2 years, that belief of mine has been corroded and thrown under the bus like never before. And that has most definitely, Elizabeth, that has most definitely led me to the rave, because the rave is the place I go to escape.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I just talk about your peaks and troughs? Because when I was talking about the rave, I saw the energy in your face and it was all lovely and we were all, you know, we were in the same spot. And then I just go and destroy that by talking about how shit the world is right now. So I'm really sorry to just completely kill your vibe. I'm
not sorry. I spend a lot of time thinking about how we live in the tension between both, and how the, like, fully aliveness for me, like I'm always thinking about how do you grow up a soul? And it feels like the temptation is to only acknowledge one or the other, right? Only notice the beauty and the goodness and the very real joy in the world, or only notice the, like, open wound at the heart of humanity that is the suffering of the most marginalized, and just the suffering of everyone, like, at some point. And I kind of love that you said both. And I also have so forgive me, we've just met. This got deep fast, but I love it. Like, I don't know if escape is the right word, because I wonder if going to the rave and finding the ecstatic and finding release and finding joy and finding beauty is what helps you keep going into these dark places and keep reporting on these things without either shutting down or sort of tipping into denial. How does that hypothesis sit with you?
So you know what? I think you are absolutely spot on, and you have read into what I'm saying with genuine insight and genuine wisdom. And I'm not saying that to be nice. I'm saying that because that's how I perceive the situation. I think a lot of the subject matter that I deal with in my work is quite grim. Yeah. It really is grim, and a lot of it is about terrible things that human beings do to each other. And as a result of that, I've always escaped in music. I think as of late, that's just gone to another level. And maybe the need to escape has gone to another level, because I really feel that we're living in quite dystopian times.
Yeah. So I started this podcast in 2017 when it felt like the world was so divided. Little did we know.
Exactly.
Trying to get us to drop a level down, like beyond the presenting issues and the things we disagree on, to, okay, so what is someone else's vision of the good? Like, what do we actually believe in? What are we prepared to sacrifice for? Like, what are we prepared to live towards? And honestly, in a lot of times, it's sort of hypothetical. People are, oh yeah, truth is sacred to me, or equality is sacred to me, or whatever it is, and they're good. And I've had times in my life where I've been tempted to compromise, and those stories are good and interesting, but it feels increasingly like we're in times where it's, okay, the cost of living into our values, the cost of staying loyal to, in your case, civility and the rule of law, and being like, how can I actually help here, has gone up. But it is sort of remarkably clarifying, is how I'm finding these times. Like, oh, no messing around now. Like, we've got to figure out how to live.
I think that's really true. And listen, I'm an 80s kid. Okay, so as an 80s kid, I am old enough to remember really basic principles that were kind of drilled into us in school in the 80s and 90s, which were really important. So things like racism is bad, okay? Racism is bad. And we can all kind of gather around that particular totem and say racism is bad. And I think most people in our society, you know, would sign up to that value. And yet, when I reference things like a genocide going on, you know, the manifest kind of reality that we seem to be living in is the lives of a certain section of society, i.e. the lives of Palestinians at the moment, over the past 2 years and longer than that, actually, it just seems like those lives are not deemed to be equal. They're not valued in the same way. And I think I'm just being really blunt here. I feel that has really shaken me. It's shaken my idea of the work that I do. Yeah. It's shaken my idea of the value that my work has. I feel like maybe in the past I had quite a grandiose, inflated sense of how much of a difference I can make. It's been a reality check, really. Yeah. And I'm just being honest with you. I haven't drawn conclusions, really. I feel like I'm working that out very much. And so when my inbox pinged and I was asked to have this conversation with you, the first thing that I thought about is, I can do this in a kind of, very structured PR friendly way, or I can just be really honest. And so today I'm really trying just to be very, very honest. And maybe this conversation will help me work some of this stuff out.
Thank you. Our producer said before this interview, who makes a really good guest? And I said, someone who's prepared to think aloud with me rather than just give me the pat answers that they're used to giving. I would love to hear about that 80s childhood, about we've heard some of the ideas that were in the air, but perhaps if you could just paint me a little picture, growing up in Huddersfield, what were the political or philosophical or religious or other formative influences on you in that time?
I completely love Huddersfield. For anyone that doesn't know, Huddersfield is bang smack in the middle of Yorkshire. It's very green, surrounded by hills. It's in a valley. In particular, I grew up in a part of Huddersfield called Birkby. And Birkby is a very Pakistani area. And so I would say my formative years, I loved them and they were really fun and friendly. They were also retrospectively looking at it, they were quite insular in the sense that my dad was a bus driver. A lot of my friends' fathers were bus drivers. A lot of our moms knew each other. Everyone was in each other's business. Everyone went to the same mosque, or the same couple of mosques, actually. We saw each other all the time. And so I had a great time. It was quite insular. And that's why kind of getting older, I think my school might have been something like 70% Pakistani, maybe 75% Pakistani. And so as I kind of went to college and then university to the big city in Leeds, which is just down the road, actually, such a huge metropolis. My mind was opened up to this other species of people. I don't know if you've heard of them, Elizabeth. They're called white people.
I hear they exist.
Amazing. So then I started hanging out with I'd say a broader constituency of people. And then that made me think, okay, I had a great childhood. I had a great time. But it was definitely insular.
So one of the things I see in conversations at the moment is there's longing for community. And maybe this is the other bits of work that I do, but so many people are like, what's gone wrong with the world is we no longer are in and out of each other's houses and we no longer know our neighbours. And what do you think the kind of imprint of that, having experienced that as a child, has left on you, I guess, positively, negatively, other? How do you think about that thing that so many people think they want now?
I'm laughing because it's so funny you say, people lament the loss of community. I think when I was a teenager, I was thinking, God, this community is so annoying. Will they just get away? Why does everyone know everything that I'm doing? Do you know what I mean? Before I get home, someone has told my mom that I wasn't at the library, actually. And I was, with some other people and I'd told a lie. This community is terrible. But actually, I really get why it's valuable. And to answer your question, I think the imprint is that I am, and if you ask most people that know me and most people that work with me, they would say I am hyper social. So I like hanging out with people. And more than that, in my work, I think the reason, if I'm allowed to be self-celebratory, the reason I like speaking to people and the reason I think I'm quite good at access work is because I will chat to anyone in any situation. So I'm talking about, I've been in category A prisons in Portland. I've interviewed convicted terrorists in Pakistan and in the UK. I've interviewed drug dealers in Thailand. I've interviewed target killers who murdered people in Mexico. So I will speak to anyone. And I think a big part of that is growing up in an environment where you are constantly surrounded by people and you have to speak to everyone.
Yeah. Could you just define access work for those of us not familiar with the TV lingo?
Yeah. So, for example, I'll give you an example. So today, after I finish chatting to you, I've got a meeting after that. I'm filming today. And today when I say filming, maybe 90% of my job is people telling me to fuck off because they don't want to talk to me. So today I am trying to get access to someone that recently got out of prison, without giving too much away. It's someone that's in the public eye and did something that many people would describe as quite embarrassing. They were caught quite literally with their pants down. They recently got out of prison. So I'm going to knock on their door. And it is my job today, with the camera crew waiting outside in the car, it's my job to persuade this individual that it's a good thing for them to go on the record for my next series. That is access work. Trying to get access to people and trying to get people to go on the record who, on paper, will want to run in the other direction, should not want to speak to you. And, I'm very happy to say, not always, and quite often it doesn't work, but when it works, it really works. And so a lot of my work is around access.
And what do you think, either in your formation or personality, or what is it that both makes you want to do that work and makes it possible for you?
Okay, so what makes me want to do that work is I'm genuinely really excited by people and stories and insights and perspectives. And I would say particularly when that's in, if you were kind of the softer edge, you could say a countercultural way, or the harder edge, you could say in a way that society deems unacceptable. And so, that's what I'm talking about, drug dealers or people that have murdered. So people that are beyond the limits of what general society sees as acceptable. I see a lot of value. I see a whole lot of value in hearing from those people. And that, I need to be clear, that's not in the context of glamorizing or promoting. It's very much in the context of understanding how people have reached their conclusions. That's really what it's about. And I think the second part of that question was
what makes it possible for you? Lots of people, 90% of the time, being told to go away, they'd give up.
Yeah. So, Elizabeth, I am shameless. Honestly, there is something in me. I don't know what it is. If you say no, I am really happy to go back 9 more times. But really, and if you want to sit down with me and say, there's no way I'm ever going to do this, that to me is just like rocket fuel. Yeah, I am shameless and I am like a dog with a bone. I will just go for it and go for it and go for it. And a lot of the time, it's really difficult and it doesn't work. But as I say, when it works, it is, I don't see that it's addictive. Like honestly, it makes me high. Like honestly, that it's such a particular feeling.
Yeah.
Such a particular feeling. And I will run towards, I will chase down that feeling.
Wow.
And I really think in my career, it's one thing that I've always gone back to and back for.
Yeah.
I am addicted to that feeling. I really am.
You got a theory about where it comes from? This is a therapist question, but I'm just really interested.
No, this is good. This therapy. Can you see the cogs turning? So, okay, I think there's a few places. So, one, I'm the youngest of 4 children. So I think I always kind of like fought for attention. So I think maybe I do like the attention. I do, like I'm just being honest about it. If someone says, oh my God, how did you do that? Or how did you get that interview? I really like people seeing it. So yeah, hey, look what I did. So that's part of it. I think, okay, so can be really, I'm not even going to ask. I'm going to be really honest with you. So I'm gay, and I think a lot of gay people, I recently read a book, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called The Velvet Rage. So The Velvet Rage is written by this therapist who worked out in San Francisco, and he was a therapist who interviewed over 20 years, lots of gay men. So it's predominantly about gay men. And one of the themes that comes out is this idea that amongst gay men in their formative years, quite often they feel perhaps that they need to work extra hard for acceptance or to impress people. And I think when I was quite young, I realized that I was really terrible at maths. And maths was not my area. But what I was good at was the English language and speaking to people and communication. What I was really good at was communication. And I think on some subconscious level, I honed that and thought, this is going to be where I build my house. This is going to be the spot. This is my superpower. I am going to run with this to the nth degree. And I think I did. I think I'm kind of still running with that, actually. I think I'm good at communicating with people. Yeah. And I will, if that sounds arrogant, it sounds arrogant. I think I'm good at communicating with people.
I mean, I feel like with the CV like yours at this point, it's all right to say that.
Thank you so much.
That's there in your childhood. But you went to Leeds University to study law. It feels like it wasn't obvious to you that would lead to journalism. Is that right?
It really wasn't obvious. Law to me was a kind of sensible degree. You've got to understand, Elizabeth. So I mentioned the immigrant family. My parents, everyone laughs when I say this, but this is absolutely true. My parents in the 80s and into the 90s when I was a teenager, they used to say to me and my siblings, so there's brother, sister, me. They used to say to all of us, if you don't go to school, if you don't make it to university, there's no point in us being in this country. But they would say that really consistently. Yeah. So not going to university, not getting a good degree, wasn't an option. And I was very lucky, I'd say, in the sense that my brother and my sisters were achievers. And so I think it's always easier when you're the younger kid and other people have already set a precedent. And so when it was time to go to university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And law seemed like a good option. And it involved the language, involved the English language, and it involved being able to debate. So in my kind of fantasy law era, I didn't really think about statute, didn't really think about the details, I was thinking, hey, I'm going to be in court.
Rhetorician.
I'm going to debate people. Yeah, I'm so good at debating. I'm so good at this. So I'm gonna communicate ideas and convince people that my client is not guilty, etc., etc. I'm gonna convict the baddies. Yeah. So maybe a little bit naive. I think maybe I think the university term starts in September, doesn't it? So by December of the first year, I knew I wasn't going to be a lawyer. It's too much statute, too much God, it's so difficult. And then I started working. I found a tiny little local paper, tiny. I think it had a circulation of 10,000. And I started working there. I got a job. So I got a job whilst I was a student. And that was my route into journalism.
And how obvious was it that both broadcast and then particularly factual documentaries would be what drew you? Did you dabble with other things? So I think in the first year, I was just working on this local paper and I really enjoyed it. And a lot of that was the access work and kind of, getting people to speak to me. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, back then it was hardly kind of chasing down criminals. It was, but just the skill of calling someone and saying, hey, I'd really like to interview you about, can I speak to the Lord Mayor about the new opening of the town hall, and learning things about press officers and like how to convince them that a newspaper with a tiny circulation is worth them investing their time in. All that kind of taught me quite a lot. And then I think quite soon after that, whilst I was still studying, I started flirting with the idea of broadcast and the BBC. And the BBC felt like this unattainable, unreachable thing that was, in a physical sense, miles away. So it was in another metropolis. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Manchester. The Manchester metropolis. Yeah, so which seemed like miles away. Yeah, another world. And I thought, okay, so if I'm going to do this, I need to kind of work out a way into there. And then I was a student for a long time. I finished the law degree. I was really religious, Elizabeth. I was very pious. And so I did a master's degree in Islamic studies. Then I studied journalism. This is back in the time where you didn't have to pay as much for a master's degree. And I think I got a scholarship, bursary or whatever it was called. And then I ended up at the end of that doing a 2-week work placement at the BBC
in Manchester in the religion and ethics department. And I hung on to that. It was meant to be a 2-week work placement, and I stayed there for literally years.
Yeah. I'm going to have to double click on the Islamic Studies Masters. You said it as if you wouldn't describe yourself as religious now. Are you happy to say a little bit about what role Islam maybe played in your life in that season and what it plays now? Just to randomly throw the chronology into chaos.
You can ask anything you want to ask. So I grew up, I was raised Muslim. Mm-hmm. I would still say I am Muslim. Mm-hmm. I think I believe in kind of a power, whatever that is. I believe, more than anything, to be completely honest, today, if you ask me today, I believe in nature and I believe in the universe. I think nature is kind of more powerful than anything else around us. I no longer, I would say, I'm not a fan of dogma and I'm not a fan of organized religion, but Islam and things like the prophets, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, through that stuff and the Quran, that is my language for how I view the universe. And so I'm still a Muslim. I still pray sometimes. I still fast sometimes. I still do that stuff. But maybe I just have a very different interpretation to the majority of the people who would sign up as Muslims. As Elizabeth, this might surprise you, but as a teenager, I don't know what was... Well, I've got my ideas about what was going on here. As a teenager, when I was about 14, 15, for a year, maybe a couple of years, I was part of something called the Tablighi Jamaat. I will forgive you if you've never heard of it.
I have heard of it. I worked on a program about it.
Okay, you know your stuff, Elizabeth. So Tablighi Jamaat, for anyone that doesn't know, I would describe them as the kind of Jehovah's Witnesses of the Muslim world. So I took it upon my 14-year-old self. I would go out with a group of group of men, actually. So I was one of the younger ones. After prayers at my local mosque, and we would go door knocking. But we'd go door knocking in such a specific way. We'd only knock on the doors of people we knew already came to the mosque. Yeah, it was a bit silly. It was a bit silly, really. And then we'd say things like, brother, we haven't seen you at prayers for 2 days. You know, we really need to work on our iman, meaning faith. And, you know, there's an afterlife and blah, blah, blah. And I think my parents, they'd never used this language, but I think the way they looked at me, that what the fuck is going on? What are you doing? Because they weren't that religious at the time.
Wow.
They were religious, but they didn't agree with door knocking.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they were looking at me thinking, you're a child. What have you got to tell the world about morality or anything else? But, you know, they let me do it. I think I grew out of that by the time I was about 17. But yeah, I was on that particular road, I think.
What changed between 17-year-old, 22-year-old doing a master's and now? What would you say were the drivers of the evolution of your faith?
I'm really aware that this might sound really derogatory, but it's just the truth. I think I just grew up. I think I really just saw that the world was a much bigger place. And, you know, I'm of the opinion if you've got a sense of a world in which there's competing factions of, you know, I'd say religions really, and I don't mean this in the derogatory way, it's just the way I view it now. A religion really is just a very, very large cult, isn't it? That's what it is really. Let's be honest about it. That's all religions are. They're just like very, very, very large, often well-organized cults. That's what they are, where everyone signs up to a particular set of beliefs. But even within those religions, let's be honest, a lot of people have very different interpretations. A lot of people don't like each other. You know, there's all that stuff. And I think the older I got, the more I'd think, okay, the story of the Virgin Mary is such a beautiful story. Oh, it's in the Bible as well. Okay, yeah, the Bible is, you know, like a previous iteration of Islam, but also the Virgin story is reflecting the story of Krishna in Hinduism. Okay, so are these maybe just these kind of urban myths that have developed into something else? And I started thinking, yeah, I think that's probably what it is. And actually, what is religion apart from saying be a decent person? Like, what value does it have? That's what I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
What value does it have unless it is telling us to be decent human beings? And then comes the operative question, which is, do you need religion to be a decent person?
Yeah.
And my resounding answer to that is absolutely not.
Yeah.
So religion can be great. And if it works for you, go for it, babes. Like, absolutely go for it. I'm here for you. I'm here for it. Do what you need to do. But if you don't need religion,
Yeah.
I'll give you a hug as well. And you can be a decent person. And some of the most moral, upstanding people I know do not prescribe to a particular faith. Go for it. If it isn't serving a purpose and it isn't making you a better person, then it has no point.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm sure we'll come back to some of that in terms of how we can engage across our divides. But I just want to fill in some gaps. So you started making documentary films and have made many award-winning films. I would love... So I have a confession to make. I don't watch many. I've watched some of yours now. And I'm just a fiction person. I like a novel rather than a non-fiction book. I like a film rather than a documentary. Maybe I'm just in denial about the world. This is my form of escape. But so I'm interested, if you don't mind going a bit meta with me, like what the form is. Like, you said, you're having some questions about the work you're doing and its effectiveness in the world. But if you kind of go back in time to those early decades, why documentaries? Tell me why. Not just for you, but in the world. Why do we need them?
Completely. So I very much started in production. Mm-hmm. So I was the guy on like two of Stacey Dooley's projects. I was the guy that used to film them.
Yeah.
Right. And I was a researcher. I was a producer. I did all that stuff. So I was behind camera. And what was the driving force? The driving force is we live in this amazing world where people have very different perspectives and really different ideas. Mm. And any story you can think of, any story that the human imagination can think of, something even more wild has happened in reality, right? Mm. And so let's go grab that. Let's get these people to tell their stories. Let's get access to people who are going to want to run in the other direction. That was very much the starting point. Mm. And then I think because I was like reasonably good at it, I started working a lot in, I guess what you can describe kind of underbelly stories. So I made a whole range of stuff about sex workers. I made a ton of stuff about addiction. I made a ton of stuff about drug dealing, did a lot of stuff about crime. And I think the more I did that, the more I thought documentaries, be it for TV or be they kind of multi-part podcast series, if the string was always the same, the kind of through line was always, here's a mad story. And you hear this phrase a lot in our industry, but people will say it's a stranger than fiction story, right? But quite often I was really going for stories that were stranger than fiction. And then the idea would be, that's the story, but what is the world that it allows us into? Yeah?
Yeah.
So it's like one of my dearly beloved commissioners always uses one phrase, which I think is particularly relevant, which is small window, big world. Nice. So you go in via a particular story and it can be hyper-local story. It can be in Portland or it could be in Huddersfield. Or it could be in Kirby near Liverpool, right? So you go in via a very particular story and then it opens up the audience's view into a whole world and a phenomenon which has a social impact in our time. And I think that has become the mode through which I like to make documentaries.
So there's something, I don't know your work inside and back to front, but there's something that I've observed in your work that I see in common with lots and lots of documentary makers and documentary presenters. And I've heard you various times compared to Louis Theroux because of your kind of the sort of places you go. And I know you've been on stages with him. But I also interviewed a woman called Rowan Deacon, who made the big Jimmy Savile documentary for Netflix a few years ago. And we had a really fascinating conversation about moral ambiguity, because there is a sense in which and I'm thinking a lot about how stories work, but the documentaries that I do watch and want to recommend to people, which I've been doing very much with Small Town Big Riot, are the ones that can hold the moral complexity of all the humans, right? That you are going into murderers and prisoners and terrorists, and over the course of the journey you're taking the viewer on, they turn from these two-dimensional representatives of inhumanity into these complex, wounded, sort of troublingly understandable people. And I would love to just hear you think aloud about that and your approach to it. And I just want to sort of acknowledge the value of it. It has really stayed with me because in some ways it really links with the kind of work that I'm trying to do. When you were making a documentary, what are you thinking about in terms of how you're portraying the people in front of you?
So I really appreciate you processing, understanding something like Small Town Big Riot through that lens. For anyone that hasn't seen that series, it's about a small place called Kirby, small town called Kirby, which is near Liverpool, and it's about what could be described as a race riot that that happened outside a hotel that was being used to house asylum seekers. And it's about disinformation, and it's about how that was organized. So that's the kind of narrow window. Through that program, you do get to meet people, and I spend time with people who on the surface you would describe as kind of persona non grata, so people that you wouldn't want around your dinner table, right? Mm-hmm. People that are beyond the realms of polite society, people that are self-confessed fascists, people who will start sentences with things like, I'm not racist, but...
There was a lot of that.
I'm not racist, but they're all a bunch of pedophiles. That's something that I heard quite often. We're not talking about you. We're not talking about you. You're not a pedophile. But are you Pakistani? Yeah. So we're not talking about you, but they are all a bunch of pedophiles. Those kinds of conversations, right? And I think it is very easy in that context, be it someone that's a racist, someone that's on death row, someone that's a drug dealer. It is really easy to not engage and just say bad beyond the pale. Let's not have the conversation. It's much more complicated, but of much more value to be able to engage, to be able to unpick, and to be able to understand their thought process. Mm. You know, I did a series a few years ago. It was called The Black and White Killing, the case that shook America. And it was about a criminal trial that I had access to in Portland, Oregon. And similarly, you know, the starting point is the man that was on trial for this murder. He'd got into an altercation at a petrol station with an African-American guy. They'd gone back and forth. They'd had a fight. And then this white man got into his car, revved the engine, and knocked over the black man, killing him. And what was discovered at the scene of the crime, he sped off, he left. His baseball cap fell off, and his baseball cap had a particular emblem on it. The police found that emblem belonged to a white supremacist group, so he was a member of a white supremacist gang. Now, you can look at that story, you can say, well, obviously he's a white supremacist, and we don't need to understand that, and we don't need to unpick it. But actually what we did with that story is we unpicked how this man had previously been in prison and how his whole journey to white supremacy was through prison gangs. And then what we were able to look at is this system in America at the moment, which is, you know, well documented for anyone that wants to see it, which is the prisons are so segregated that if you want to survive, quite often you need to join a race-affiliated gang. So then it went from being a story which was about one incident to being bigger and bigger and bigger until you end up being able to tell a story of a social phenomenon. Ultimately, what was the conclusion of that story? The conclusion of that story was the American prison system has turned into a factory for white supremacy. So you start with one kind of micro story, which is important and relevant, but it's very easy to just say, oh, we know that's a race crime, end of. And you zoom out and out and out until you're able to talk about something that affects every single one of us, affects society.
Yeah.
And so all it is really is about being able to have a conversation and to understand the thought process of how someone that is deemed beyond the pale has reached their conclusions. That's what I like doing.
So there's a particular moment in Small Town Big Riot where I can't remember exactly where it comes, but you end up being part of the story somehow because you're asking questions, and then people start putting memes of you on these hyperlocal groups as like suspicious Pakistani man going up to people in the street, which is part of what's driven the disquiet. And then you talk to a woman called Patrice, who is the shorthand would be a white supremacist. As you said, like all of these labels, how helpful are they? Who knows? But you have a conversation about who is and isn't British, and you say to her, I was born here. Am I British? And she says no. And the next thing you said was, I'm so grateful to you for speaking to me today. How was your coffee?
Yeah.
Yeah. I cried too in that moment. And then there's the shot of you outside the coffee shop, and you said, she's not the problem. Sorry. And while I want to say it, like, I want to honour the...
Don't be sorry.
I want to honour the moral courage that it takes to stay committed to not demonising even someone who is basically doing go home to your face in a coffee shop. And kind of ask, how on earth do you / all of us hold on to that deep conviction that we have, that like attacking back can't be the solution? Because I was astonished, and I would love to know a bit more what was going on in you for that moment.
My sweetheart, you are so adorable. it was never my intention to make anyone cry.
It's fine, I cry all the time.
I cry all the time. Seriously, the older I get, I'm just crying all the time. That particular exchange, okay, how can I describe this most honestly? So firstly, I think the thing to say is, in those moments, I am very much in zone. And what I mean by that is I have a really trusted producer with that particular project, this guy that I work with all the time. He's called Stefan. I love him. I trust his judgment, and I really trust the director. He's called Leo. I really love Leo. Leo and Stefan are good people, and they're good friends of mine. And in that instance, so it's important to say I'm in zone because I know this is the mission.
Yeah.
And so
it's helpful for me to hear because you look alone, but you're not alone. And even my like deep protectiveness of you at the moment, that helps me like let go of it a bit.
I really appreciate that, and I'm not alone. I'm not alone, and I have to say, I think so. The clip you mentioned, it's worth saying as well. I was really surprised because often the BBC will get me to chop stuff up and put it on my socials.
Yeah,
I think that clip, I remember uploading it on a Sunday morning before the program went out, or just after the program had gone out, to kind of point people towards iPlayer. And I remember then checking my phone maybe 3 hours later. I was at lunch, and it had truly gone viral. It had like a few 100,000 views.
Yeah,
it had gone everywhere. And I remember thinking, oh, okay, this is kind of a big deal. And now it's been seen like millions and millions of times. I think in that moment, I was in this place where I thought, this is the task at hand, and I want to understand who this woman is and how she's got to this place. It's worth saying this is a woman that was standing for election at the time. So I spent a day with her. So there's a scene, I think just before the coffee shop scene, where we are observing her and with her permission, filming her, handing out flyers to get people to vote for her in an upcoming election. And I saw on the street how people would look at the flyer, look at her, have a conversation with her about her white supremacy, and then say things like, you need to go fuck yourself. And I saw how in that instance, that made her harden her position.
Yeah.
right? And I think we live in a time. So now, if I can, with your permission, if I can zoom out and just like talk about some quite grandiose ideas. We're going there, so we might as well talk about grandiose ideas. We live in a time where people fuck up and say terrible things. But because of the world we live in and because we're all on social media, the response and the outrage often causes people to harden in their position, right? Human nature means that if someone feels attacked, they harden in their position.
Yeah.
And I think part of the job for me is not, I need to be really clear, I'm not in a place where I'm saying, let's all hold hands with the fascists and be nice. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need to understand how people have come to their conclusions. That is the only way you can stop this from happening again and again and again. It's the only way you're going to be able to have a conversation with these people. It's the only way you're going to be able to win people over. And I think there are, we talk about holy cows and we talk about totems. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about civility, about preservation of human life, about things that, universally, across all religions, across all belief systems, we can agree on. Those things exist throughout societies and throughout ages. And yet we seem to be in a time where a lot of that stuff is being threatened.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is being threatened. There seems to be this kind of idea that there's scarcity and we have to fight for resources. And, it really pains me to say it, but all you have to do is go on a social media platform right now, and it will take you 2 minutes or less to find someone who will make a comment like, if they're dying in boats, then they're obviously not meant to be here. It'll take you 2 minutes to find a meme, which I saw that day when I was speaking to Patricia. I saw a meme that had a dinghy in the channel, and there was a story about a dinghy that had sunk. Sorry.
It's okay.
There was a story about a dinghy that had sunk, and people had written underneath. Someone had made a meme, and it was a picture of a dinghy, and it was a picture of a pin. And the meme was, retweet if you would use the pin. And so there was lots of people underneath with, like laughing emojis. What is wrong with the two of us? Seriously.
Honestly, I think if you can talk about this stuff without feeling something's gone wrong, and this is all part of the problem, right? We have hardened our hearts. And we need soft hearts to say this is not okay.
Completely. It's not okay, but, in that context, what you can do is you can look at that stuff and you can start typing terrible things to people and responding, or you can think, I want to try to understand how we've got to a point where we have a kind of basic loss of humanity, where we are so desensitized to people who've lost their lives because they're trying to get to safety or because they want to be reunited with family members. They want to get away from war. How we can be desensitized to what the UN has called the collective punishment of the Palestinians. How we can be desensitized to a man-made, manufactured campaign of starvation. Mm-hmm. How we can keep scrolling. So you can either think, okay, I'm just going to be in that and this is just too much. And I'm going to be one of those people that has outrage in moments, but doesn't really do anything about it. Or you can think, okay, what is this doing to our society? What is this doing to the people around us? What is this doing to our world? And one way of dealing with that, I'm not saying of course it's not the only way, but one way, and a way that I have access to, a skill that I have is being able to document and being able to understand.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what was going on in that coffee shop with Patricia. I was trying to document and I was trying to understand. Yeah. That's all it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's one of those incredibly counterintuitive truths, because in the moment, what feels righteous is rage, right? What feels righteous is attack, is contempt. That feels like the morally pure response. And the actually much more difficult and much more effective, strong thing In my tradition, we'd call it turn the other cheek, right? Like when someone hits you in the face, do not hit them back and do not run away. Plant your feet and as far as possible, try and keep the conversation open. Like try and keep the thread of relationship live, because that is the only way any of you get out of here alive, basically. And it's been a real privilege, I have to say, watching it as like, I think a lot about reconciliation theory and peace building and have a lot of like theory in my head, and seeing it at work in a documentary was so much more powerful. Books and books and books of theory. But one, and I will let you go, but I have to confess one thing that was going on for me in the moment. And bear in mind, this is like my whole thing. This is my whole work. I couldn't tell if you had done an incredibly morally courageous thing of turning the other cheek, or have you heard of fight, flight, freeze, fawn? If you had gone into fawn, which is some people fight back, some people run away, some people freeze, and some people, and this is well documented with women and minorities, like when we're under attack, sometimes the survival mechanism is like, yes, of course, sir. How can I help you? And I've done it in my life in situations where I've experienced rabid misogyny and I've tried to make them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
I can imagine
that the fact that I couldn't quite tell until afterwards when you started saying and you started explaining, and I was like, okay, no, that he was fully in control in that moment. And that is the challenge, I think, for us, is sometimes turning the other cheek, which is the actual mode of transformation in the world, looks slightly too much like moral cowardice. And I don't know how we distinguish or make sure we're rooting ourselves in one, not the other. That's not a coherent question, but you sort of see what I'm feeling towards.
No. It's such an interesting perspective, and I think it's a really important perspective. I genuinely think it's valuable because the idea. So what you speak about in terms of, is it turning the other cheek? So I would say there's part of it which is turning the other cheek, but it's to a very specific end. There's a very specific mission statement there. So it's not turning the other cheek because I'm thinking I want to assert myself as, being the moral one. It's not turning the other cheek because I want to diffuse the situation and walk away from it. It's turning the other cheek with a very specific goal in mind. And that goal in mind is to understand, because this problem is not about dear Patricia or Patrice. It's not about Patrice. It's about what has got us to this point in society. It's about what are the signifiers which mean that if you're, I've got young nephews and a niece, and I often think about the world that they're growing up in. So what are the signifiers that have got us to a point where they are, to all intents and purposes, seeing live streamed images of a genocide on their phones? Their children.
Yeah.
What has got us to a point where they're seeing that? And then they see the adults in the room. The adults in the room, our politicians, our leaders, kind of saying, yeah, this is bad, but we're not actually going to do anything, really. Those weapon sales are going to continue. That funding is going to continue, but we're going to condemn it and something needs to be done, but we're just not going to do that thing. How have we got to that point? And that's a big idea. But my point is, if you take it right back to that moment with Patrice in the cafe, there is a point to me trying to defuse that situation. And when I say to her, I'm grateful for you speaking to me today. How's your coffee? I'm completely serious. I mean it. Because what is not going to help that situation is if I lean over and say, I think you're stupid, or I think you're morally corrupt. It's not going to help that situation. I honestly think, there's a bit in that cut that never made the cut, because that conversation went on for, there were so many iterations of that edit. I remember there's a part of that conversation where she said, Muslims are different. They're different. They have a different moral code. They're just different. Like, they're not going to fit into this society. And I said to her, and I'd bought her the coffee, and I remember, and I'd spent all day with her by that point. I said to her, do you know I'm a Muslim? And her jaw hit the floor. She went, what? And I said, you know, I'm a Muslim. And she said, no, what? No, but you're not like really a Muslim, are you? And I said, no, I'm a Muslim. Like, grew up in a Muslim family. My family's all Muslim. I pray now and again. I fast now and again. I've got an Arabic name. I have Muslim values, like whatever that is. I only eat halal. What more do you want? I'm a Muslim. She's like, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. And you could see everything, you know, like you could see and you know, part of that, of course, it was about making the documentary and it was about that scene that illustrates a point. But it's also a part of me that wanted to leave her with an impression that like, maybe you need to rethink this.
Yeah.
Patrice, maybe you've got this wrong. And to this day, you know, I honestly, Elizabeth, honestly, I'm not kidding. This sounds really grandiose. I have honestly prayed for Patrice. I swear to God as my witness, that day when we were traveling back, I prayed for Patrice. When the program went out, I prayed for Patrice. I even sent her a message and said, thanks for giving me your time.
Oh, I could talk to you for a whole other hour, but I'm going to honour your time and say, Mobeen Azhar, thank you so much for speaking to me today on The Sacred. Well, raving as a sacred value is a first, but I love it, as you maybe could tell. And also the rule of law, that sense of kind of institutions that we can trust, that will hold individuals and organizations and nations to account, and that being something that Mobeen's really seeing or feeling slipping away. And I loved how honest he was about how shaken he is by that. I think he named something that a lot of people have been feeling. Speaking about his community growing up, he said, community is terrible, actually. Loved, again, really honest. Like, in some ways, the utopian dream of living near our friends, being in the lives of our neighbors, that used to be just life, that in many parts of the world is still just life, and that many of us in the kind of atomized, isolated, prosperous parts of the West long for and romanticize, is not all joy and like shared meals and someone to take you to hospital. It's also someone gossiping about you. It's also feeling like, you know, privacy, also maybe feeling like there's quite a conformist culture around. And it's something that I think a lot about as I'm talking to people about community who desperately want to connect into community and be part of more interdependent relational ways of living, and that there's a cost to it. Like, there's a reason that left to our own devices, if we're not thinking in long-term ways, often we will choose to live we'll choose to move away from people. We'll create as much private space for ourselves as we possibly can. And sometimes that's needed and sometimes that's healthy. But there's also all these kind of unintended consequences that we're seeing work out across our societies. And I have concluded that community is worth those costs, that the ways in which it's terrible when they're within the bounds of health are worth it, that being lonely and atomized and separated from each other is just bad for us. It's bad for our bodies. It leads to social atrophy. It leaves us with a sense of meaninglessness and longing for belonging, and that those things are more serious threats to our flourishing than the annoyingness of being up close with other people. But not everyone will agree, and that's okay. So it was so interesting hearing Mobeen talk about his like very pious religious teenage years and early 20s, being part of the sort of Muslim alternative to Jehovah's Witnesses, really like street-based outreach, knocking on doors, trying to encourage people to be more pious. And I want us to hold in our heads like the image of two Mobeens, like that incredibly pious young Muslim man trying to persuade other people to follow the path of Islam. And now kind of, those of you listening rather than watching won't know, but Mobeen has like peroxide blonde hair. He's incredibly cool looking. He's just sort of, he looks like a raver, and still calls himself Muslim, right? That's really evolved for him. But it's a word that he would still claim They're the same man, right? Young Mobeen now, he will continue to evolve and change. We all do. It's interesting, like, which of those you think you would feel more comfortable with? Like, which of those you would find setting off your people like me syndrome? And maybe both, depends on your background. Maybe you'd feel more comfortable with one than the other. And I think remembering that people change, that they contain so many seasons and lives and expressions can help us be more curious to kind of what's going on underneath all those external presentations. So this is going to sound a little bit self-congratulatory, but I noticed in this interview that I've really grown, because Mobeen said some things about religion in general, like, is it just a cult? Do we really need it? Some views about organized religion that a lot of people share. There's very commonly held views, but as someone who is a Christian and is actually kind of sees the beauty of so-called organized religion in lots of ways, despite being very aware of its faults and failures. Whenever someone says something that could sound dismissive or disagrees with something that's very close to our identity and very close to our heart, very tender to us, it's incredibly easy to feel defensive. And that probably would have been how I would have felt in the past. I felt it in the interviews, having to consciously go, don't get spiky just because they've expressed something negative about something that you really hold dear. And this time I didn't get it. And it might have been partly because of where it came in the interview. I don't know. But I felt like I really was able to stay in the place that I know is possible, which is to hold a different perspective and stay feeling open and curious and interested in why he got there. But let me tell you, I've been doing this job since 2017. If you felt defensive when he said that, or maybe you're coming from a completely different perspective and you feel defensive when someone expresses something completely different, or another guest says something that touches on your identity and your belonging and your way of seeing the world, like, don't worry about it, completely normal. And I'm encouraged, it's possible for that distinctive reaction, if you don't feed it, to just really soften and ebb over time. Apologies for the slight self-congratulation there, but this is skill that I'm trying to build. And then we landed on this, like, the heart of his work. And what I do think is really real moral courage to be a brown person spending a lot of time around white supremacists. And not just spending a lot of time around them in order to make them look terrible, to, like, raise awareness of these monsters, but actively trying to complicate people's picture of them and help us understand their influences and why they've come to the conclusion that they've come to. There is something extraordinary about that work, about the people who can hold their steadiness in the face of that level of dismissiveness or hatred or prejudice. To react to someone like Patrice, he said Patricia, and I meant to go back and check. Maybe she uses both names, Patrice or Patricia. Apologies to her if I've got her name wrong. To really want her good. And I knew he meant it watching it. Or I did as soon as I said, to begin with, I was like, is it just a threat reaction? But then I was like, no, he really knows what he's doing. And then he said, I prayed for her. I prayed for her when the show went out. And yeah, the beauty of that posture, to have someone tell you that you are not British because your parents were immigrants to your face, and then to pray for her. I feel like I've just been shown what my Christian nonviolent tradition looks like. Jesus very explicitly says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so attack you or dismiss you. And there's this guy who's a Muslim, who is very suspicious of organized religion, who's out at the weekend raving his head off. And he is embodying that command of Jesus better than I ever have. So that's good and humbling and challenging and profoundly moving. And there was also this this moment where she hadn't figured out he was a Muslim, which is sort of hilarious. And he says, "You know I'm a Muslim." And she's like, "No, you're not really Muslim." And he's like, No, you know I'm a Muslim. And that what's happening in that moment is this, we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, this very, very, very important thing where someone's mental model falls apart. Where all the categories she had around that word Muslim, like if you double clicked on it, what her definition of it would have been was just like thrown up in the air. Because someone had listened to her and sat with her and laughed with her and drank coffee with her and been a whole complicated, fragile, messed up, amazing human person with her. And that is so what we are trying to do with this project, and what I'm trying to do is to recognize my mental models, recognize my preconceptions. And this is, to be clear, the word prejudice is very morally loaded, as if everyone, like anyone who has prejudice is a terrible bad person. That's not true. The predictive processing model of cognition means that the only way we go through the world is having like guesses. We have to have guesses about what someone's going to be like. We have to have categories. We have to have assumptions. Otherwise, there's just too much sense data and it's completely overwhelming. We cannot approach every human being with complete openness without having made a guess about what they'll be like based on their name and the colour of their skin and their height and what they look like and the context that we've seen them in. We all have prejudices in the sense that we all prejudge. That is just how humans are made. And yet, if we allow ourselves to, those two-dimensional line drawings can get coloured in these extraordinarily beautiful ways. And when we're able to do, maybe not quite as intensely as Mobeen's doing, although it is more and more of us need to be doing it, when we allow ourselves to go to someone who we know has got a negative two-dimensional line drawing of someone like us and complicate that for them by not going on the attack, by not pouring contempt on them, by being with them as a human, we can begin to slightly temper the harm that can happen when these prejudices are continually reinforced and we never allow themselves to just be first draft, when we let them be final say on whole types of people and groups of people and perspectives in the world. I've rarely been more inspired by an interview, frankly. I would really encourage you to go and watch Small Town Big Riot. The temperature around asylum, hotels and immigration has only gone up since Mobeen made that film, but it's still incredibly, incredibly relevant and illuminating. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Sacred. My name is Elizabeth Oldfield. We are a project made by Theos. Theos is a think tank that works on religion and identity and social cohesion, and our deep values does such amazing work, if we do say so ourselves. So please go and check out all the other stuff being done by our amazing team. The particular team that works on The Sacred is Lizzie Harvey, Amari Yagandran, Lydia Taylor, Joe Downey, and we are edited by Drew Hawley. Our music is by Luke Stanley, and we look forward to speaking to you next time.